The assembly of fates. The crystal spires of Vorthak Prime gleamed like frozen lightning against the purple sky. Within the Grand Assembly's towering dome, representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for what many believed would be the most important diplomatic session in centuries. The air hummed with translation devices and the nervous energy of 1,000 different species, all watching as humanity prepared to make its case for equal standing among the stars. Ambassador Elena. Vasquez adjusted her simple black diplomatic suit as she walked down the crystalline corridor toward the assembly chamber. Her heels clicked against the translucent floor, each step echoing in the vast space designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. Behind her walked Captain Jonas Reeves, his military dress uniform pristine despite the tension radiating from every line of his body. Dr. Amara Singh, the expedition's xenobiologist, followed close behind, her dark eyes scanning the alien architecture with professional fascination mixed with growing unease. The energy readings from their security systems have tripled since yesterday, Singh whispered, her voice barely audible above the ambient noise. They're preparing for something more than a diplomatic hearing. Reeves' jaw tightened, but he kept his voice low and steady. Stay alert, but remember why we're here. Elena's words today could determine whether humanity gets a seat at the galactic table or remains forever on the outside. Elena nodded, her expression calm despite the weight of an entire species resting on her shoulders. She had spent months preparing for this moment, studying alien customs, learning the intricate protocols of galactic diplomacy, and crafting arguments that she hoped would bridge the gap between human ambition and alien skepticism. As Earth's first official ambassador to the Xanthari Empire and their coalition of allied species, she carried the hopes and dreams of 8 billion people. The massive doors to the assembly chamber slid open with a sound like distant thunder. The sight that greeted them was breathtaking and intimidating in equal measure. The chamber was a perfect sphere, its walls lined with thousands of observation alcoves where representatives from across the galaxy watched with eyes that glowed in every color of the spectrum. At the chamber's heart, a platform of living crystal rose from the floor, surrounded by floating dais where the coalition's most powerful leaders sat in judgment. The Trap Springs Chancellor, Kethvar of the Xanthari Empire, dominated the central dais, his reptilian form draped in robes that seemed to absorb light itself, his golden eyes fixed on Elena as she approached the speaking platform, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical force. Around him, the other coalition leaders watched in silence, the insectoid Vectar with their compound eyes, gleaming like black diamonds, the ethereal Nixhai floating in their energy fields, and dozen other species whose names Elena had memorized during her preparation. Ambassador Vasquez of Earth. Kethavar's voice resonated through the chamber, amplified by technology that made every word feel like it was spoken directly into each listener's mind. You come before this assembly claiming that humanity deserves recognition as an equal partner in our galactic community. Elena stepped onto the platform, her chin held high. I come before you not as a supplicant, but as a representative of a species that has proven its worth through centuries of struggle, growth, and determination. Humanity asks not for charity, but for the opportunity to contribute our unique perspectives and capabilities to the greater good of all sentient life. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. Elena had studied their reactions during her preparation, and she could read the subtle signs of interest, skepticism, and in some cases, outright hostility. The Xanthari had built their empire on the principle that newer species must prove themselves through decades of subservience before earning any meaningful rights. Humanity's request to skip this traditional period and enter as equal partners was seen by many as presumptuous. Your species has existed in space for less than 2 centuries, Chancellor Kethavar continued, his voice carrying a note of disdain. You have no understanding of the delicate balance that maintains peace among the stars. Your history is one of constant warfare, environmental destruction, and internal conflict. What makes you believe you are ready to stand among civilizations that have achieved harmony for millennia? Elena had expected this line of attack. Respectfully, Chancellor, our struggles have been our greatest teachers. We have learned from our mistakes, evolved beyond our primitive impulses, and develop technologies and philosophies that could benefit the entire galactic community. Our diversity of thought, our resilience in the face of adversity, and our capacity for rapid adaptation are not weaknesses to be overcome, but strengths to be celebrated. She gestured to the viewing screens that surrounded the chamber, where images of human achievements played in sequence, cities that floated on water and hung in the sky, medical technologies that had eliminated genetic diseases, art and music that captured the full spectrum of human emotion and experience. We do not ask you to ignore our past, Elena continued. We ask you to see what we have become and what we might achieve together. The silence that followed was pregnant with possibility. Elena could feel the attention of the galaxy focused on this moment, and for a heartbeat, she dared to hope that her words had found their mark. Then Chancellor Kethvar stood, and Elena's blood turned to ice. The moment of truth. Ambassador Vasquez. The Chancellor's voice had changed, becoming formal and cold. This assembly has received disturbing evidence regarding your true purpose here. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her expression steady. I'm not sure what you mean, Chancellor. My purpose here is exactly as I have stated, to advocate for humanity's inclusion in the galactic community. Our intelligence services have uncovered proof that you and your delegation are here not as diplomats, but as advanced scouts for a human military expansion. Kethvar's words fell like hammer blows, each one carefully calculated for maximum impact. Hidden within your diplomatic vessel are advanced scanning systems designed to map our defenses, catalog our technologies, and identify potential targets for future aggression. The accusation hit Elena like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to respond, but Kethvar continued, his voice rising to fill every corner of the vast chamber. Furthermore, we have intercepted communications between your ship and Earth revealing plans to establish covert bases throughout neutral space, in direct violation of the treaties that govern civilized conduct among the stars. Elena's mind raced. Every word he spoke was a lie, carefully crafted to justify what she now realized had been planned from the beginning. She looked desperately toward Captain Reeves, seeing her own shocked realization mirrored in his eyes. They had walked into a trap, and now the jaws were closing around them. Chancellor Kethvar, Elena said, her voice cutting through the murmurs of shock and outrage that rippled through the assembly. These accusations are completely false. I demand the right to examine this so-called evidence, to cross-reference your claims with our actual mission parameters, and to— The evidence speaks for itself, Kethvar interrupted. The question before this assembly is not whether these crimes were committed, but how to respond to such a blatant betrayal of diplomatic protocol. Elena felt the chamber's attention shift like a vast predator turning its gaze toward prey. She had been in enough negotiations to recognize the signs. The decision had already been made, and this entire proceeding was theater designed to justify it to the watching galaxy. I invoke the right of diplomatic immunity, she said, her voice steady despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. Under the Accords of Seren Prime, no diplomatic representative may be held accountable for alleged crimes without a full tribunal and the presence of advocates from their home government. For a moment, hope flickered in her chest. The Accords were ancient law, respected by every civilized species in the galaxy. Surely even the Zenthari wouldn't dare. Chancellor Kethvar's laugh was like breaking glass. The Accords apply to recognize diplomatic representatives of sovereign nations. Humanity has no such recognition. You are here by our sufferance, nothing more. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. In one sentence, he had reduced her from ambassador to prisoner, had stripped away not just her protection, but her entire reason for being there. Therefore, Kethvar continued, by the authority invested in me by the Galactic Coalition, I find Ambassador Elena Vasquez guilty of espionage, deception, and crimes against galactic peace. Elena saw Captain Reeves tense beside her, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon before stopping. There were too many of them, and any aggressive action would only validate their lies. Dr. Singh had gone pale, her scientific mind probably calculating the same odds Elena was facing. The penalty, Chancellor Kethavar declared, his voice echoing in the sudden silence, is death. The price of truth. Elena's world narrowed to a single point of clarity. This was the moment that would define not just her fate, but humanity's place in the galaxy. Every eye was watching, every recording device capturing what would happen next. She could beg, could plead for mercy, could try to negotiate, and in doing so, she would confirm every stereotype they held about her species. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and looked directly into Chancellor Kethavar's golden eyes. If this is the justice of the galactic community, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber, then perhaps humanity is better off standing alone. The execution was swift and efficient, a pulse of energy that left no mark, no blood, just Elena Vasquez collapsing to the crystal platform as 8 billion people watched their first ambassador die for the crime of believing in a better future. Captain Reeves caught her body as she fell, his face a mask of controlled rage and grief. Dr. Singh knelt beside them, her hands shaking as she checked for signs of life that would never return. Around them, the chamber had fallen into an unnatural silence, as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Chancellor Kethavar looked down at the scene with satisfaction. Let this be a lesson to any species that believes it can deceive the coalition. Order will be maintained. But as the transmission ended and the news of Elena's execution spread across the stars, something else began to spread with it. A whisper that would grow into a roar, a question that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. What happens when you murder hope itself? In the depths of space, hidden installations that had slept for decades began to wake. Messages encoded in commercial broadcasts started reaching their intended recipients. And in the command centers of Earth, men and women who had prepared for this exact scenario began to implement plans that would make the galaxy remember one simple truth. Humanity had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and the death of their own world's environment. They had reached for the stars despite every obstacle, had built civilizations on dead worlds and made gardens bloom in the void. And now, they had been shown exactly what galactic civilization was worth. The age of diplomacy was over. The age of consequences was about to begin. The war room awakens deep beneath the lunar surface in chambers carved from solid rock and shielded by technology that made them invisible to any scanning device known to galactic science. General Victoria Cross stood before a wall of screens that painted her face in shifting hues of red and blue. The images streaming across those displays told a story that would have been impossible to believe just hours before. The cold-blooded execution of Earth's first galactic ambassador, broadcast live to every inhabited system in known space. Victoria's silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her pale blue eyes held the kind of focus that came from decades of military command. She had been preparing for this moment for 15 years, ever since the first contact protocols had been established, and certain uncomfortable truths about galactic politics had become clear. The Phoenix Protocol had been her brainchild, a network of contingencies that most of Earth's leadership had hoped would never be needed. General Cross, came a voice from behind her. Commander Blake Morrison stepped into the chamber, his dark skin glistening with sweat from the sprint through the base's corridors. All department heads are assembled. We're ready for your briefing. Victoria nodded without turning away from the screens. How long since the transmission ended? 47 minutes, Blake replied, checking his chronometer. The news networks are going insane. Riots have started in New Geneva and the Mars colonies. The president is demanding immediate retaliation. The president, Victoria said quietly, is about to learn that retaliation was set in motion the moment Elena's heart stopped beating. She turned to face the assembled officers who had gathered in the chamber's central area. These weren't politicians or diplomats. They were soldiers, scientists, and intelligence operatives who had spent years preparing for the day when humanity's peaceful approach to galactic relations would prove insufficient. Each face in the room reflected the same mixture of grief and cold determination that Victoria felt burning in her own chest. Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria began, her voice carrying clearly through the reinforced chamber. Operation Phoenix is now active. The network-awakened Zara Okafor sat at her console in the intelligence wing, her fingers dancing across holographic displays as she activated communication protocols that had been dormant for over a decade. As Earth's chief intelligence analyst for extraterrestrial operations, she had helped design the network that was now coming online across the galaxy. Her dark eyes reflected the glow of dozens of status indicators as hidden installations reported their readiness. Ghost Station Alpha 7 is online, she reported, her Nigerian accent lending a musical quality to the technical terminology. Sleeper agents in the Xanthari commercial sector are responding to activation codes. Deep cover operatives in the Vectar shipping lanes have confirmed receipt of new directives. Victoria moved to stand behind Zara's chair, watching as the galactic map filled with blinking lights, each one representing a human asset that the Coalition had never suspected existed. How many assets total? 237. Confirmed active, Zara replied. Another 43 are in deep cover and will require manual activation. We have operatives in every major system, General. Some have been in place for nearly 20 years. The scope of the network was staggering. While Earth's official diplomatic corps had been making public overtures about peace and cooperation, a shadow organization had been quietly placing humans throughout galactic society. They worked as mechanics in Xanthari shipyards, as data analysts, in Vectar communication hubs, as traders in the neutral zones where information flowed like water. To the galaxy, they were invisible, just another species trying to make a living among the stars. Commander Morrison leaned over another console, his expression grim. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from President Chen Williams. He's demanding an explanation. Victoria's jaw tightened. David Chen Williams was a good man and a capable leader, but he belonged to the world of public politics and diplomatic solutions. The Phoenix Protocol existed in darker waters, in the realm of necessity that few elected officials were prepared to navigate. Put him through, she ordered. The president's face appeared on the main screen, his features drawn with exhaustion and barely controlled rage. Behind him, Victoria could see the chaos of the presidential command center, with aides rushing back and forth and multiple news feeds playing in the background. General Cross, President Chen Williams began, I want to know exactly what you're doing down there. My intelligence briefings are telling me that we have military assets I was never informed about, spread across half the galaxy. Are you telling me we've been conducting covert operations this entire time? Mr. President, Victoria replied, carefully. Operation Phoenix was authorized under Executive Order 7749, signed by your predecessor. The compartmentalized nature of the program meant that details were restricted to essential personnel only. Don't give me bureaucratic double talk, Victoria, the president snapped. Elena Vasquez was just murdered in front of the entire galaxy, and now I'm finding out that we've apparently been running some kind of secret war? Victoria felt the attention of everyone in the chamber focused on her response. The next few minutes would determine whether Earth's response would be coordinated and effective, or fragmented by political infighting. Mr. President, she said, her voice calm but firm. For the past 20 years, every diplomatic overture humanity has made has been met with condescension, delay, and ultimately betrayal. While our ambassadors spoke of peace and cooperation, I was tasked with ensuring that Earth would have options if diplomacy failed. Today it failed spectacularly. The price of preparation, President Chen Williams was quiet for a long moment, and Victoria could see the weight of leadership settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with resignation. Show me what you have planned. Victoria gestured to Zara, who brought up a three-dimensional map of the local galactic sector. Red indicators marked major coalition installations, while blue dots showed the positions of human assets. The overlay revealed a pattern that had taken decades to establish. Humans positioned at every crucial choke point in the coalition's infrastructure. The Xanthari Empire and their allies control galactic civilization through three primary mechanisms, Victoria explained. Economic dominance through control of trade routes, military superiority through advanced technology, and information control through their communication networks. Over the past 20 years, we have systematically infiltrated all three. She pointed to a cluster of indicators near the Zenthari homeworld. Our people in their shipyards have been gathering technical specifications for their most advanced vessels. We know the weaknesses in their hull plating, the frequency vulnerabilities in their shield systems, and the backdoor access codes for their navigation computers. How is that possible? The President asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Commander Morrison stepped forward. Sir, humans have one advantage that no other species in the galaxy possesses. We're underestimated. To them, we're a primitive species that barely understands the technology we're using. They never considered that our primitive minds might be capable of understanding and improving upon their designs. Zara brought up another display, this one showing financial networks that spanned dozens of star systems. We've also been tracking their economic vulnerabilities. The Coalition's prosperity depends on a complex web of trade agreements and resource allocations. We've identified 17 critical nodes where targeted disruption could cascade into system-wide economic collapse. And the information networks? President Chen Williams asked, though Victoria could tell he was beginning to understand the scope of what had been planned. Every major communication hub in Coalition space has at least one of our people working in it, Victoria replied. We can monitor their military communications, disrupt their propaganda networks, and when necessary, broadcast our own messages directly to every inhabited world in their territory. The President was quiet for several minutes, studying the displays with the expression of a man who was rapidly reassessing everything he thought he knew about his own government. This is madness, he finally said. You're talking about destabilizing an entire galactic civilization. No, sir, Victoria replied firmly. We're talking about revealing the truth about that civilization. Elena Vasquez went to Vorthak Prime, believing that the galaxy was governed by laws and principles. She died because she discovered that it's actually ruled by fear and the threat of violence. We're simply going to make that truth impossible to ignore. The first strike is, if summoned by her words. Alerts began flashing across multiple screens throughout the chamber. Zara's fingers flew over her controls as she processed incoming data from across the galaxy. General, she called out, we're receiving confirmation from Strike Team 7. The primary communication relay for the Zenthari 3rd Fleet has gone offline. They're reporting it as a technical malfunction. Strike Team 12 has successfully infiltrated the trade computers on Vector Prime, reported another technician. They've introduced calculation errors into the shipping manifests. Nothing obvious, but enough to cause delays and confusion. And Strike Team 3? Victoria asked. Just went active at the Coalition's intelligence headquarters on Nix High Station, Zara replied with a grim smile. They've been working as maintenance staff for 8 years. As of 10 minutes ago, the Coalition's 3 most secure data servers are now running modified software that reports everything as normal while copying all intelligence data to our networks. President Chen Williams stared at the displays in stunned silence as reports continued to flow in. Across dozens of star systems, the carefully planned first phase of Operation Phoenix was unfolding with mechanical precision. Supply lines were being disrupted, communication networks were developing mysterious glitches, and crucial intelligence was being quietly copied and transmitted to Earth. How long until they realize what's happening? The President asked. Days, maybe weeks, Commander Morrison replied. Each individual incident looks like equipment failure or human error. It's only when you see the pattern from our perspective that it becomes obvious we're behind it. Victoria moved to the central command console and activated a secure channel that connected her to similar facilities hidden throughout Earth's solar system. On the screen, the faces of commanders she had worked with for decades appeared, men and women who had dedicated their lives to preparing for this moment. All stations, this is Victoria Cross with authentication code Phoenix Rising, she said formally. Operation Phoenix is now fully active. Begin Phase 2 implementation immediately. The responses came in quickly, each commander confirming that their assigned targets were being engaged. The Mars orbital defense platforms were activating weapon systems that officially didn't exist. The asteroid mining facilities in the outer system were revealing themselves to be heavily fortified military installations, and hidden bases throughout the solar system were launching ships that bore no resemblance to anything in Earth's official fleet registry. My God, President Chen Williams whispered. How long have you been planning this? Since the day we made first contact, Victoria replied. The moment we realized that the galaxy was not the peaceful confederation of equals we had hoped to, joined but an empire built on the subjugation of newer species, she turned to face him directly, her expression serious but not apologetic. Mr. President, Elena Vasquez believed in the possibility of peaceful coexistence. So did I. But she also understood that peace can only exist between equals. And the coalition has made it clear that they will never see us as anything more than useful primitives, to be exploited, or dangerous upstarts to be eliminated. So what happens now? The president asked. Victoria looked back at the displays showing the unfolding operation, at the blinking lights that represented human agents across the galaxy, at the tactical projections that showed a careful plan decades in the making finally coming to fruition. Now, she said quietly, we show the galaxy what happens when you mistake human patience for human weakness. Elena died believing in the rule of law. Before this is over, there will be law in the galaxy again, even if we have to write it ourselves. The chamber fell silent except for the quiet hum of equipment and the steady stream of reports from across the stars. In the space of a few hours, humanity had transformed from a species seeking acceptance to one demanding respect. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for the storm they had unleashed. 3 weeks after Elena Vasquez died on the crystal platform of Vortec Prime, the Xanthari Empire was collapsing from within. What had begun as isolated technical failures had cascaded into system-wide breakdowns that defied every attempt at repair. Trade routes that had operated flawlessly for centuries now experienced constant delays and mysterious cargo disappearances. Military communications suffered from interference that seemed to follow no recognizable pattern. Most disturbing of all, classified information was appearing on public networks throughout coalition space, revealing decades of corruption, oppression, and lies. Operative Nina Torres stood in the shadows of a maintenance corridor deep within the coalition's primary intelligence facility on Nixhai Station. For 8 years, she had worked as a systems technician, invisible among the hundreds of support staff that kept the galaxy's most secure installation running. Tonight, she was about to complete the mission that would bring the entire edifice crashing down. Nina's appearance was unremarkable by design: average height, brown hair kept in a practical ponytail, coveralls that marked her as just another worker. But beneath that ordinary exterior was one of Earth's most skilled operatives, a woman who had spent nearly a decade learning every secret the Coalition thought they could hide. Ghost 7 to control, she whispered into her concealed communicator. I'm in position at the Central Archive, beginning final data extraction. From a secure facility buried beneath the Swiss Alps, her handler's voice crackled through the encrypted channel. Copy, Ghost 7. You have a 30-minute window before the next security sweep. Download everything and get out. Nina connected her device to the archive's primary access port, watching as terabytes of classified data began flowing into storage, drives that were smaller than her thumbnail, but contained more processing power than most planetary computer networks. The files she was copying contained the true history of galactic civilization, records of species that had been eliminated for refusing to submit, documentation of resource theft disguised as taxation, and correspondence between coalition leaders that revealed the casual cruelty with which they maintained their power. As the download progressed, Nina thought about Elena Vasquez, a woman she had never met but whose death had given meaning to every sacrifice she had made over the past 8 years. Elena had believed that truth and justice could coexist with power. Nina was about to prove that sometimes justice required the systematic destruction of that power. The Regent's Dilemma. Halfway across the galaxy in the crystalline spires of the Coalition's ruling council, Regent Vexmore paced the length of his private chambers with the jerky, agitated movements of a being under enormous stress. The Regent was ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species, his translucent skin showing the intricate network of bioluminescent veins that pulsed with the rhythm of his 3 hearts. For over 2 centuries, he had maintained the delicate balance of fear and cooperation that kept dozens of species under coalition control. Now that balance was crumbling, and he couldn't understand why. "Show me the reports again," he commanded, his voice creating harmonics that would have been painful to human ears. Chancellor Kethvar materialized as a hologram in the center of the chamber, his reptilian features drawn with exhaustion. "Regent, in the past 72 hours we have lost primary communication relays in 14 systems, suffered complete economic data corruption in the Vector trade networks, and experienced what can only be described as a coordinated intelligence breach across multiple security levels. And you still maintain that this is coincidence?" Vexmore's bioluminescent patterns flared with anger. "That a species we executed their representative 3 weeks ago had nothing to do with our current difficulties?" Kethavar's silence was answer enough. The Chancellor had been so confident that executing the human ambassador would demonstrate the coalition's strength and resolve. Instead, it seemed to have triggered a cascade of disasters that threatened the very foundations of their civilization. "Perhaps," came a new voice from the chamber's entrance, "it is time to consider that we underestimated our victims." Both leaders turned to see Ambassador Kelthis entering the chamber. The Ashani diplomat was one of the few coalition members who had spoken against Elena Vasquez's execution, arguing that it violated the principles of civilized conduct that supposedly governed galactic society. His crystalline form caught and refracted the chamber's light, creating patterns that spoke of deep unease. "The humans have been among us for decades," Kelthis continued, his voice carrying the musical quality of his species. "We assumed they were primitive, that their technology was crude, that their minds were limited by their brief lifespans. What if we were wrong about all of it?" Regent Vexmore's patterns pulsed with dismissive anger. "One species cannot bring down an empire that spans half the galaxy. One species," Kelthis replied quietly, "that we taught to hide in plain sight. One species that we forced to learn patience while denying them justice. One species that apparently spent 20 years preparing for the day we would reveal our true nature." The final gambit Captain River Nakamura stood on the bridge of the EFS Retribution, watching through the main view screen as the combined fleets of a dozen coalition worlds formed defensive positions around Vorthak Prime. The ship she commanded didn't exist in any official Earth Navy registry. Like the other vessels in her task force, it had been built in secret shipyards, hidden in the outer darkness between stars, using technology that combined human innovation with specifications stolen from the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. "Long-range sensors confirm 47 coalition vessels in defensive formation," reported her tactical officer. "They're maintaining standard patrol patterns, but their communications are chaotic." River smiled grimly. The communications? Chaos wasn't accidental. Human operatives throughout the coalition fleet were feeding false information, disrupting command protocols, and generally ensuring that coordinated defense would be impossible. After 3 weeks of systematic sabotage, the coalition military was discovering that their most basic systems could no longer be trusted. "Signal from Admiral Torres," her communications officer announced. "All task forces are in position. Operation Revelation is ready to commence." River activated her command console, opening a channel that connected her to similar vessels positioned throughout the system. On her screen, the faces of other captains appeared, men and women who had spent years training for this moment in facilities that the galactic community had never suspected existed. "All ships, this is Captain Nakamura with authentication code Truth Rising," she began formally. "Today we reveal to the galaxy exactly what humanity has become. Today we show them the price of murdering hope." She paused, thinking of Elena Vasquez, of the dignity with which she had faced her execution, of the words she had spoken about humanity standing alone if necessary. Elena Vasquez believed that the galaxy could be better than its current leadership, River continued. She was right. After today, it will be. The attack, when it came, was unlike anything the Coalition had ever experienced. Human ships didn't simply engage the enemy fleet. They demonstrated technology that shouldn't have existed, capabilities that defied everything the Coalition thought they knew about human science. ships that could phase in and out of normal space, weapons that could disable vessels without destroying them, defensive systems that seemed to anticipate attacks before they were even launched. But the real revelation wasn't the technology. It was the coordination. Every human vessel moved with perfect precision. Every attack was timed to maximize psychological impact rather than physical destruction. They weren't trying to conquer the Coalition fleet. They were putting on a demonstration for the galaxy to witness. The truth revealed, as the space battle raged around Vorthak Prime, Nina Torres completed her mission on Nix High Station. The data she had extracted was already being transmitted across the galaxy through communication networks that the Coalition could no longer control. Within hours, every inhabited world would have access to centuries of classified records that revealed the true nature of galactic civilization. On screens throughout Coalition space, populations that had lived under the threat of the ruling council's displeasure learned about the species that had been quietly eliminated for refusing to submit. They read correspondence between their leaders, discussing them as resources to be exploited rather than sentient beings deserving of respect. They discovered that the peace and prosperity they had known came at the cost of systematic oppression of anyone who dared to question the established order. And they learned about humanity, a species that had endured 2 decades of condescension and delay, that had tried repeatedly to find a peaceful path to equality, and that had finally been pushed beyond the limits of patience when their ambassador was murdered for the crime of speaking truth to power. In his private chambers, Regent Vexmore watched the data streams with growing horror, not at what was being revealed but at the implications of how it had been obtained. The humans hadn't just infiltrated Coalition intelligence networks. They had been inside them for years, copying everything, learning every secret, preparing for this exact moment. How? He whispered to the empty air. How did we miss this? The answer came from Ambassador Kael'thas, who had remained in the chamber throughout the crisis. We missed it because we never considered that a species we viewed as inferior might be playing a longer game than we were. While we focused on maintaining control for the next century, they were planning for the next millennium. On the view screen, images from the battle around Vorthak Prime showed Coalition vessels surrendering rather than continuing a fight they couldn't win. The human fleet wasn't destroying them. It was simply demonstrating that resistance was futile, that every system the Coalition had trusted could be turned against them. What do they want? Vexmore asked, his bioluminescent patterns now flickering with what could only be described as fear. The answer came in the form of a transmission that appeared simultaneously on every communication device throughout Coalition space. The image that appeared was not of a military commander or a political leader, but of a simple woman in a black diplomatic suit, standing in the same chamber where Elena Vasquez had died 3 weeks earlier. People of the galaxy, the woman began, her voice carrying clearly through translation devices that the Coalition no longer controlled. I am Captain River Nakamura of the Earth Strategic Fleet. 3 weeks ago you witnessed the execution of Ambassador Elena Vasquez, who died for the crime of believing that civilized beings could live together as equals. The camera pulled back to show that she was not alone. Beside her stood representatives of dozens of species, many that the galaxy had believed extinct, others that had hidden in the outer darkness for centuries, all united by their shared experience of coalition, oppression. Today, River continued, we offer you a choice. The old order built on fear and maintained through violence has ended. In its place we propose something that Elena Vasquez died believing in, a true confederation of equals, where might does not make right, where newer species are not condemned to centuries of servitude, and where those who govern do so with the consent of the governed. She gestured to the alien representatives beside her. These are the voices that the Coalition silenced. These are the species that were told to wait their turn, to accept their place, to be grateful for whatever scraps of dignity they were allowed. Today they speak again. In the space around Vorthak Prime, the Coalition fleet hung motionless, their weapons disabled by technology they couldn't understand, their crews watching the same transmission that was being broadcast to every inhabited world in known space. This is not conquest, River said, her words carrying the weight of absolute conviction. This is justice. The coalition's leaders will not be harmed, but they will stand trial for their crimes against the principles of civilized conduct. Their victims will be given voice, their lies will be exposed, and the galaxy will decide what kind of future it wants to build. She paused, and for a moment her expression softened with something that might have been grief. Elena Vasquez believed that truth and justice could coexist with power. Today we make that belief reality. The new dawn 6 months later. The galaxy was a very different place. The coalition of worlds had been dissolved and replaced by the Galactic Assembly, a democratic body where representation was based on population rather than military strength, where newer species had the same voice as ancient civilizations, and where the principles that Elena Vasquez had died defending were enshrined in constitutional law. The trials of the coalition's leaders had been broadcast across the galaxy, revealing the full scope of their crimes while demonstrating that justice could be both firm and merciful. Some, like Regent Vexmore, had accepted responsibility for their actions and now worked to make amends. Others, like Chancellor Kethvar, remained defiant to the end and found themselves confined to penal colonies where they could contemplate the consequences of their choices. In the same chamber where Elena had died, a memorial now stood, not just to her, but to all the voices that had been silenced by those who confused power with right. The inscription, written in every language known to galactic civilization, was simple. Truth cannot be killed. Justice cannot be silenced. Hope cannot be destroyed. They can only be delayed until someone brave enough to speak them rises to demand that the galaxy listen. Nina Torres, no longer an operative but now serving as the Assembly's Director of Historical Truth, often visited the memorial during her work documenting the coalition's crimes. Sometimes she was joined by River Nakamura, who had transitioned from military commander to diplomatic service, helping to build the peaceful galaxy that Elena had envisioned. And sometimes, when the chamber was empty and the light fell just right, across the crystal platform, visitors reported seeing a translucent figure in a black diplomatic suit standing where Elena Vasquez had made her final stand, watching over the democracy she had died to make possible. The galaxy had learned a lesson that would echo through the centuries, that the patience of the just has limits, that the silence of the oppressed is not the same as consent, and that when you murder hope itself, you discover that some things are stronger than death, more enduring than empire, and more powerful than all the weapons in the known universe. Elena Vasquez had believed in tomorrow. Now, thanks to the choices made in her memory, tomorrow had finally arrived.